lot of well, you do a lot of crossover of characters in your books. Can we expect to see any of the characters from the Griff appear in anything in the future?
Well, I don't own them. Ian and I own them. We have joint custody of them every other weekend. I haven't thought of another story. I think we're both sort of waiting to see what happens if it becomes a movie, and then because you go, I'm never doing this again, and then somebody goes, we'll give you $2 million, and you go, except this one time, and then I'm never doing it again. So, we definitely left it open to take the story further, but I don't know. Do you have any plans? Because I get a piece of it if you do.
Oh, yeah.
And you're welcome to go ahead and run with it Saturday morning cartoon show, but
Are there any,
just saying. This is what negotiation looks like. No, go ahead.
are there any plans to jump into the zombie craze, or is that already past that?
Not for me.
Yeah.
I wrote a zombie book.
Did you?
Yeah, zombie Christmas book, which is more rare than... Actually, is AMC the people who do Walking Dead?
Yes.
Yeah, they tried to buy my zombie book. And I said mean things to them. So they bought something else, and clearly I shouldn't have said mean things to them. Yeah, I feel like I've kind of done that. But if there's supposed to be a guy making a movie out of Stupid as Angels, so I could be involved. I'm supposed to narrate it. But I'm a claymation narrator, like Burl Ives in the series. Yeah, so I'll forever haunt your children in claymation.
Well, maybe we should open the floor up for questions.
Pick somebody. That guy.
Yeah, this guy over here. Just a quick thing about the artist problem. Too many of them all over the place. No, is it hard, like if you wanted to use let's say that your situation allowed you to use a name artist, and feed people like, who's the one you mentioned, the English guy?
Oh, Alan Moore.
Alan Moore, people who are famous just for doing all their own stuff. Do they ever do other people's stuff, or do they only ever do their own?
Even Alan Moore doesn't draw his own stuff.
Oh, he doesn't?
No, he doesn't draw it. He just writes it, and then somebody else draws it. But a lot of the guys, the really top names, are under contract, and they're not allowed to do anything but Marvel, or they're not allowed to do anything but DC. So, which is not to say there aren't a lot of talented guys that are independent. But, I think Ian had, a couple of guys. We were told many more were under contract that weren't, but there were a number of them that are under contract for. It's like the old studio system in Hollywood. They just aren't allowed to step out. So if we had been hired by Marvel to do the Griff, we could have had a much wider choice. But that's sort of it. Those guys have a really tough row of making a living.
Who would have been your dream artists?
Ian likes a guy named Alex Ross.
Yeah, and Assad Ribic is also, I don't know if you know his stuff, but he's pretty extraordinary.
I would have, Toulouse-Lautrec. So, another question? You.
Oh, you teased him earlier about his MFA question, but I was thinking when you're dealing with things like Lamb or Fool, I mean, they take well-established ideas and pieces of literature and they kind of insert big and fart jokes. And I was wondering if, right?
She's discovered my formula. Yeah. Doing well.
Within that formula, are you exposed to the literary kind of the way it's canonized and worshipped, or especially with Fool, and then write the story, or do you kind of hear about it and say, I want to make fun of this, and then do your research?
Anything that I research, I usually start out not knowing a lot about it and end up sort of a semi-expert by the time I get done. And when it's a piece of literature like the Gospels or Shakespeare, I'll read a little bit of criticism too, because you want to see how there's almost a Cliff's Notes that, particularly with Shakespeare, was much harder. I spent a lot of time, in the Gospels and reading all of the historical stuff around it. But when you're doing King Lear, which is what my book Fool is, there is no historical accuracy to it. there's just nothing that you can go to that's historically accurate because it's written in Elizabethan English with an Elizabethan hierarchy of royalty, except that it's set, if it's accurate, in 400 BC. So there's no castles and dukes and earls and all that stuff. So you're sort of given this license to just go, okay, it's going to be sort of medieval, and I made up my own idiom for it. But yeah, I read a little bit of criticism. There was a point where I think we saw 4 or 5 Lears in person. We saw Lear, and I'd watched many DVDs of it, and then read the play and dissected the play. So there is that. It's not. I'm not completely unskilled at reading, but I try to avoid it when I can. No, but you don't use the same sort of deconstruction skills that you use when you're getting an MFA in literature, because stories aren't put together the same way that they're taken apart. And that's sometimes a big problem with writing programs, is that young writers are taught from a deconstruction point of view, and that's not the way you make. Those aren't the same tools that you make stories from. There's the stories. That's what you end up with in the rubble when you take stories apart. So does that answer your question?
So like a writer and an English teacher coming at it from completely different angles.
A writer and a literature teacher are coming at them from 2 different places, which is not to say that you can't benefit from someone's criticism. To read literary criticism, to read, for instance, with Lear, there's a lot of psychology going on there because of the daughters and the father and so forth. And it sometimes helps to have a fresh look at it. But no, the way you write and the way that things are analyzed don't fit together very often, and there are very few people that can do it in both directions. So, is there a question over here somewhere?